now, ladies and gentlemen, host of Stand Up with Pete Dominick, which, ironically or specifically, how are you?
Great to see you, Hal. Sorry I'm late. I think I was in the wrong place, but I'm very excited to be on your show, and I'm very excited to see you. You look great. You sound great. You look fit.
I'm doing all right. Yeah, I'm holding it together. I'm not getting a lot of sleep lately though because I'm on multi-house duty where everyone around me went on vacation at the same time, and so I volunteered to pet sit and make sure everybody's animals are fed, which I do, and I'm fine with that. It just all of it at once. I have a theory that they thought a asteroid was going to hit Las Vegas, and they just all left town at the same time. Just hang out, and we'll be back if it doesn't happen. But all's well. Anyways, hi. Lots of, obviously, sorry to bring you in on a slow news week, but you and I have not been able to speak, recently about the current unpleasantness and all that stuff. So I'd love to get your take right out of the gate on the kind of cascading, fumbling. I have my own theories of the motivations of the shooter and the relation to this, and Trump basically like begging for some kind of civil war out of all this nonsense.
Yeah, Hal, it is a lot, obviously, and I think that we need to understand how much has changed in the world of political assassinations, the motivations for them, how they're done, who, it's still overwhelmingly white men doing it. But I mean, the internet has changed everything, and the internet radicalizes people. Last night, I think it was in Arizona, where what's her name, Carrie Lake, was like, "Never send your kids to college. This guy was a Trumper,
right.
And as soon as he went to college," but it's the internet. The kid went to one semester of college in a Mormon state. So I think that people need to understand a lot of the terminology that a lot of experts have been talking about, from groypers to, black pilling to incel to all these things that aren't motivated. These shooters aren't necessarily, and we don't quite know this one specifically yet, but we get some good educated guesses. And of course, the thing that ties them all together is that the internet is available everywhere in the rest of the world, but only in America do you have more guns than people and the accessibility to them, So, I mean, I think
actualizing your radicalism is a lot easier. You don't have to, scramble to put together explosives. You don't have to scramble to put together a bomb. You don't have to scramble to put together a gun. You can get all the parts and do that. All right. So I wrote on my Substack a little while back about a group relatively little known at the time called the Zizians. Are you familiar at all with the Zizians? And the La Rosa intrigue of this trans-identifying vegan rationalism cult, a breakaway of the rationalism community online that had killed 6 people. Their leader faked his/her death by pretending to drown off a boat that they had bought that they were going to tow to San Francisco and live on in the Bay rent-free while they ran solar panels because they all had jobs at Google and Zoom and all these big tech companies, because they were all incredibly bright, all of them engineers or tech people, majority trans-identifying, in varying degrees of transition, not because of the gender-specific trans-identifying aspect that most people think of, people who have gender dysphoria and want to transition from one gender to the other, but from a transhumanism, which Donald Trump thinks is transgender for everybody, and this is kind of where he gets it from, this transhuman idea of just body modification and functional modification, do whatever it takes to win and break through and gain control in certain areas. And so this will allow you to, they could literally sleep in women's shelters because they identified as women, and so they could move around the country, and this was part of their plan. Long story short, they murdered a pair of their parents, one kid's parents. They killed a Border Patrol agent. 3 of them are on trial and are possibly going to receive the death penalty for that because they were driving over the border at the time. And then the one that had allegedly drowned off the boat showed up in the next hotel room when they raided a hotel room and found the 2 shooters, or the 2 people who supplied the guns to shooters. Anyways, rationalism has been this kind of borderline, was for a long time almost a leftist new atheist cult, a break off from new early 2000s new atheism online, kind of like, and there's this, the reason it pricked up my ears was because there's this overlay with the trans-identifying community and the furry crowd and gamers and Gamergate that went alt-right. And this kid and the people around him reeks of it. And that's why the governor, I think, is having a hard time explaining what the logic is, because nobody has heard about this stuff, and they don't have a particular ideology. They don't.
Yeah.
They just want it all to break down, so they don't care how they do it.
By the way, my band, the Zizians, is probably going to have to cancel it, change our name.
I always thought you should have called yourselves the Asians, not just because it's more appropriate, but also because it puts you at the front of the line in the CD store. You know, when you go buy a CD or LPs.
Oh, that's a good point. It's just
Don't
a bunch of bald.
You're back there with ZZ Top, and you sound nothing like them. You guys are all techno.
The Asians are touring now. I think that the point about the governor of Utah not understanding, I think it's probably even more important that almost nobody in media understands it. You just explained something that I wasn't familiar with, and it's like kind of alt media and independent media and niche media that is doing a really good job trying to understand this or living to some extent in that world themselves. Right. I mean, MSNBC's got like one woman named Brandy Zadrozny who's very good, but she's got way too much on her plate following a lot of these different kinds of conspiracies and these different subcultures, these internet, Reddit, dark web subcultures. I mean, I interviewed Gil Duran, who is a really smart journalist who educated me and a lot of others on and is doing a great job with linguist George Lakoff at their Substack and media outlet, talking to us about the tech billionaires and the techno state and all the things that they want, which there's some overlap here. But the point is, if our government leaders can't keep up, it used to be, run-of-the-mill traditional type terrorism that they couldn't keep up with. Adapting the techniques, the way that they were communicating at times over video chat, video games, and so on. If our government can't do it and journalism and media can't do it, it's going to be hard for the public to understand and wrap their head around that. And we're going to go into our traditional crouches and corners as to conservative and liberal and never understand. And I think it's really important to understand the root causes of any problem. So that you can develop a threat matrix to defend against that problem or to fight against that problem. And we are way behind in all the important institutions, it would seem, except for the Hal Sparks Show, apparently, who understands this deeply.
Well, yeah, I dive into these kind of things. Anytime I recognize that someone is dodging the explanation when they desperately want it to be cut and dry. The Republicans would love for this to be a very obvious, like, trans sociopath goes on, kills pure of heart Christian right winger and therefore sets off what they would like to be the Civil War. The problem is that the trans partner / roommate of the shooter is cooperating, whereas the effectively straight identifying shooter himself is not. His trans roommate turned him in immediately when he sent those things about help me go pick up the gun. It's wrapped in a towel in the woods. That's why there were FBI agents in that area looking for the gun, was because the trans roommate / partner called the cops. And so that's why the governor and everybody else is having a real hard time, except Trump, who's just making it up as he goes along. Make this fit a narrow narrative that feeds what is effectively, and I blame branding. I blame the fact that everybody is so narrow casting these days that they're almost trapped in their own box. You can't be victimized by somebody who's inside your box even a little bit. And so you have to otherize everyone all the time. Look at Thomas Crooks. Look at Routh, who's in court this week. Both of them Trump supporters. Both of them, in one case, the idea was Crooks thought he didn't go far enough. He was closer to being a groyper, like we're talking about with Robinson. Routh was one of these people who just was a purist on everything except one issue, and then was nuts and never got a shot off and all kinds of other stuff.
And Mark David Chapman wanted to impress Jodie Foster. Assassins don't always fit into a box on your team or another. I mean, even the guy who killed the Minnesota legislators had some, he had some Christian nationalist views, obviously a Republican, conservative, Trump supporter. We can go on and on. But, to me, I think the solutions to these, there isn't really any easy solution.
Right.
But to me, it always comes back to the ubiquity and accessibility, and passion for firearms in America. And if you could make it harder for some people to get guns,
Right.
that would make the killing maybe a little less, as we've seen in the states where they've been able to do that. So I mean,
I agree.
sometimes it just
Yeah. I
it's
certainly think that is the case with handguns, especially like in the case of the kid that shot up the Catholic school a couple weeks ago, or
yeah.
people who last minute buy a handgun and like. But this 30-06 rifle is the low hanging fruit that was in that household for decades, more than likely. That's a gun from the early '80s. You know what I mean? It's not. This is not top line. Thomas Crooks had an AR-15. I believe, and so, or an equivalent. And the rifle this person was using was a deer rifle that they'd had for a long time. So that, like, even if we'd have made up our mind 10 years ago to start cleaning up after a lot of these guns that were out there, if Beto O'Rourke had his gun seizures, this would not been one of the guns they would have taken. It's not that kind of thing.
I think it's an important point to make, but at the same time,
I think it's ego. I think ultimately, no matter the one thing all these people have in common is an isolationist mentality linked with a total self-absorption. And they believe that their gripe is more important than the life of another human being. Whatever that is, what you can put all the, like the Unabomber. I think these people have a lot more in common with the Unabomber in that, he wanted people to read his stupid paper so much that he blew up a bunch of secretaries and tried to kill people in the post office and airplanes.
I think that's probably true around ego, but I think the even more accurate, wonder what you think, issue that connects a lot of not all the shooters, well, they're all men almost entirely, but is loneliness. And we've learned years from experts on extremism, especially these anti-government white Klan types, that a lot of these guys they're lonely and they get recruited and they just want to hang out with a bunch of their buddies. And you can do that now online over and around any single topic that you're interested in. You've got your community here. I've got my community. We are non-violent and not instilling violence on. But the bottom line is loneliness brings people to certain spaces. It used to be an actual literal space that people would have to meet in the woods and talk about how they're going to kill black folk or whatever it is. But now it's the internet. You can find anybody else. So a lot of times, it's a lot of times it's loneliness that brings these people to these spaces where they become absolutely radicalized by these crazy theories that I still don't understand as well, apparently, as Hal Spark.
Okay, so just to clarify, and I'm fairly certain this is going to play out this way because it's got all the signs of this group. So the rationalism groups that broke off, which came from a blog I believe called Less Wrong in the mid-aughts, or maybe 2011, 12, somewhere around then, is based on this idea of AI doomerism and and technocracy based on everything must be decided through rationalism. And there's subscribers to it on a pedestrian sense, like the Presbyterians of this movement are all in Silicon Valley. And you'll hear this from people like Elon Musk talking about first principles all the time. And where first principles is the kind of like, let's look at a problem and let's see what the real parts of the problem is, and we'll disassemble it and put it back together. And that, if you're making Candy Crush, who gives a shit? You're not gonna get nobody's gonna get killed over that. It doesn't matter. If you fail, it won't change the world. When you go after Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, then you're really like this move fast, break thing shit. That's also crucial to this rationalism idea. It kills people. It harms people's lives. And at the very fringe of it, you get pedophiles referring to themselves as MAPS, the minor attracted persons. You get furryism as a militancy, those kind of things. And it is arguably the same as like the outer edge of the groypers on the other side. I am convinced that there's so much overlap on a bunch of these issues that we're no longer dealing with like fence post extremism, far left and far right, but the crust of the pizza that thinks it's the pizza, right? The crust is now convinced it's the pizza.
I don't know about your crust metaphor, but I guess it works. But do you think, and I worry that from what I'm learning about this kind of online culture, that it gets worse because it's copycat. It's let me
Mm-hmm.
outdo,
Yes.
and it's content creation. Assassination is content
Right.
creation,
Mm-hmm.
and that concerns me a lot because again, the authorities have no idea what they're doing, and neither do a lot of journalists that need to be able to explain this to us. And I think probably most importantly, so we can protect ourselves and so we can find it in our own sons. Again, I'm going to stick
Mm-hmm.
mostly to young men here, to make sure that you know what your kid is doing online. And that's not
Right.
always easy as a parent necessarily, but
Right.
we can all do better. We did a pretty good job. My daughters are now 17 and 20.
Mm-hmm.
They're not young men either, but never were.
I have a
But
son, and he's my son is 14, like entering basically into that window of stuff. And he's social, and we're social as as a family, but also as his testosterone starts to show up in greater and greater amounts. That is also, you know, something to be aware of during that transition time biologically in a young man, because the intensity of the hormonal attachment to feelings increases during that window quite a bit, and it does it shockingly fast. And there are myriad attempts to throttle it, to attempt to stop the loneliness, whether it's alcohol or in the case of the Zizian rationalists through transition, that they will monitor and modify their hormones, not because they're transitioning through something, but because they belong to a subculture that believes your body, your choice ultimately means transhumanist modification of yourself. And why not start now, since AI is going to kill us in 5 years anyways? And there's a ton of that. That is the fastest growing red zone on the internet right now. That is that area.
are you? I mean, are you sure it's the fastest growing? Or are you
Yes.
just saying
Yes.
hyperbolic?
No. It is the abs. It is the. I'll tell you why. Because the white supremacist Stormfront kind of Groyper crowd or whatever has been around for a while. It's borderline gentrified. If you listen to Nick Fuentes compared to KKK guys of the 70s, he sounds practically grandfatherly. He sounds
Yeah.
like Orrin Hatch at times. If you caught him on a hot mic, but the rest of it sounds pretty patient about a lot of these things. Like his plan is, he even came out with a big if you engage in violence, you're out of the movement, statement, which is very, it's diplomatic for where he's already moved into that diplomatic phase. These people have not, and it is untethered from worth. The value is the action. The action has value even if it's unsuccessful. And there's a thing that popped up in this that really, we've had a problem with on our side, which is accelerationists. Susan Sarandon is an accelerationist. And for those that don't know, accelerationism is this belief that it's all going to go to shit, and after that we can build a utopian, communist, socialist, authoritarian, monarchical, doesn't matter, whatever they think is on the other side of the system we're in collapsing, that's when it'll all build back magically, because the system is the thing holding back people from being their best selves. And so if it fell apart, we'd all just start pulling together like after Katrina.
I think you need to, when you say we have an issue on our side too, and I'm sure you're right, but I think we need to think of a better example than Susan Sarandon, who's 70.
Right. No, she's an accelerationist in the classic sense, in that she's like, vote for Trump so the whole thing falls apart and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was right, but that was 10 years ago, and she's got no clout, and so I'm interested in who on
I'm using
side.
That's an analogy for what the movement is about. What I'm saying is that online in this group, these are super accelerationists. Do you understand? They're like, kill somebody, start the Civil War. Well, you could argue that Manson was an accelerationist like this. Manson thought, we'll trigger a race war by writing pigs on the wall in the blood and pretending this was done by black people. That's what the plan was. That's what Helter Skelter was. And this is Helter Skelter 2.0, like Paul in our chat is pointing out.
I hear what you're saying, but I think that instead of saying on our side, and again, I would be unhappy to be wrong on this. I hope I'm right, but I do think that when we talk about sides, I use the phrase Earth
Well,
One
I'm not
a
saying
lot.
they're on our side. I'm saying on our side of the spectrum, if I had an example to give of someone who's an accelerationist, it's Susan Sarandon, just so people can get a grip on the idea.
I
These
think
people are not on our side. They're also not on the right's side either. They believe that both. That's why this guy was non-aligned. It's why he was not registered as a Democrat or Republican. It wasn't an accident. He's not an independent. This is a specific part of this group.
Sure. And I think that everything you're saying is accurate of especially these young folks and the category of people we're talking about. But I'd like to further the conversation to a certain extent. I mean, I think it's interesting hearing people talk about what's important to them. And I think that we can divide ourselves to a certain extent amongst those who have regard for others, those who are empathic about strangers, those who don't want to be silent in the face of tyranny of this right-wing regime, certainly. But the idea that Charlie Kirk and so many on the right, they try to act like they are thoughtful Christians, but they're not. I mean, they're terrible people if they don't know who you are, but around large swaths of people. So there's some of us who still care about strangers, who believe in empathy, who want to connect people, build community, and care about people who we can't relate to. And by the way, don't wish suffering on people who we hate. There's a guy in my high school we have 20 people, Hal, in a chat of high school friends, which I love. It's pretty impressive. When Charlie Kirk died, one of the guys who I knew was MAGA, but nobody ever talks politics in there, dropped in and paid tribute to Charlie Kirk. And I called him what he is. And I told him to lose my number. And because he pretends to be a Christian, but he doesn't have regard for people he doesn't know. And most importantly, I said to him, I don't wish you, his name is John, I don't wish you or your family any suffering. But the fact is you support and probably believe in the suffering of others. And I don't. And that's the kind of the way I'm separating people right now. What do you think of that? Is that too...
Okay, there are a couple of things. One is I get that. I always give people room to hurt before I move in for correction. So I will always, if somebody is in a sad space about something, even a stranger, I automatically give them space, because part of the thing about being, if they're going to just evangelically sell Christian values, I'm going to embody them as best I can. And maybe hope that that's part of their come around. And the other thing too with these guys is that I don't know that they perceive what he's doing as an act of making other people suffer. They have this perception, and I think this is the thing we have to focus on breaking, that they're the ones suffering, and that's the cause. That these trans people are trying to cut their kids' dick off. That black people are murdering everybody on trains everywhere. Just see it, look on your phone, and they're murdering everyone, and we're not doing anything about it. Nobody's going to jail. They're just releasing them out on the street like it's a Dirty Harry movie in 1968. And they think this all the time. Now, they're deluded and full of shit, and some of them use that as a mask for their own bigotry, no question. But there's a good portion of these assholes who are just as online deluded as this shooter very well may have been, in that they fucking think Twitter is a window pane. They look at it and they go, I saw 100, black crimes yesterday, and I saw this one woman calling for forced castration of males until they pass a test on whether they should procreate, and a woman-only world, and blah blah blah, like libs of TikTok.
And by the way, I do support a few of those. I should.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think most of us dreamt of a Mars Needs Women kind of vacation spot when I was 16. That was my dream vacation. I just come back dehydrated. And anyways, you know what I mean? I think they don't. I agree with you. I think oddly enough, they agree with you. Just they're different on the target. And I think that's the part where some of them aren't reachable. If your friend's a bigot, I don't know him, so I can't speak to it. But if he's,
He's not my friend either, I should say, but he's in the group, and I told him in my private text, I go, hey, listen, we were never friends. Right. But I think you make a really good point, and I'm glad that you did. I want to underscore that one of the most I'll never forget where I was sitting. I was at Sirius XM back in the day, about to go on live on my show, and I remember reading the statistic, like this Pew or Gallup survey that said like 61% of white Americans feel that they are more discriminated against than people of color. That was years ago, Hal, that I read that statistic that it was taken. And I think you're absolutely right about white men, especially feeling like they are the aggrieved. They are the victims. My ex-father-in-law was always pissed because he got passed over for a promotion because he said of affirmative action when he worked at Ford in the assembly line. And he said, they gave a black guy the job over me. And I said to him, did it ever occur to you? I go, maybe so, but did it ever occur to you that you were the worst of the whites? The point being, they do feel aggrieved and discriminated against. That's why I think it's important that white men, straight white men like you and I, are at the tip of the spear going out and talking about this, because we're going to be the most convincing people to the ones that are likely the biggest part of the problem, which is overwhelmingly white men. Not the case.
I got to say, like, so much of this, everybody acts like it's fucking new, and it's not. Do you remember the movie Soul Man?
Yes.
Right. 1980, 87? The idea when affirmative action kicked in really heavy, and it was the story of a dude who couldn't get into school, even though he had 1-to-1, he had, everybody at that school has straight A's or whatever, and he couldn't afford it, so he decides to go for one of the black scholarships and has to live as a black guy. And never mind, he looked like an Indian with a jerry curl, which was always the big standout. And and who wouldn't want to date Radon Chong? Let's be honest. But like that was enough of a gripe to become a pedestrian comedy in the mid '80s. So none of this is different. Add on top of that decades of it. The last, 10 years of lawsuits by Asian people about Harvard admissions, and they're the ones being, kicked out on that part of it, and the extra ammo that was, put in through that fight. And you understand where they got it, whether they're experiencing it or not. You start to understand where they're getting it from. And that's also part of our media landscape. It's part of our the story we keep telling ourselves. Dude, if you watched American movies since, fucking 78, you would think the CIA killed everyone. And not only the CIA, but the leader of the CIA against a rogue group inside the CIA of 5 people who are the only ones who can stop the guy who's killing everybody. So much of just that bullshit that gets thrown around is just it's hack at this point, right? So the same thing is true of this kind of dopey exceptionalism amongst a swath of upper middle class white trash that are pissed that they're not getting a head start that they think they used to have, which, by the way, they fucking didn't. They had dirt on their faces and black lung and shit like that for decades, if not a century and a half. So, but there's ideas like it's our turn, and then it wasn't because it's nobody's turn, in a system like this. But they feel like it should have been. They were promised this by a certain group.
They could still sit at they still weren't, suffering from racism. They were suffering from all kinds of deep poverty and addiction and so on, obviously. But I also think the other category of people who are claiming that they're discriminated against, we hear this all the time, is Christians. In America, Christians are being discriminated against, and the rest of us are saying, hey, listen, you have all the power. You have the court. You have the executive branch. You have the legislative branch and the judicial branch. You are in charge. That's why I always so irked when people would call my show or argue with me. You don't care about Muslims. They're anti-gay, pushing people up. I'm like, listen, I'm against all the fundamental religion. I'm against all of it. But I'm most concerned and most against the one that has most of the power in my country. And that has forever been Christians, now more than ever. And they are taking rights. They've always been taking rights under the flag of Christianity. So the idea that they're more discriminated against, they get the 10 Commandments in school now, Hal. They are in charge. We're headed towards Gilead, not Berkeley.
Yeah, well, okay. So that I would argue that in terms of the administration, they have a like a delivery system in the administration at best, but certainly not a true believer. Not that they need one, but this is classic, like the town preacher becomes the mayor shit. Even though he's screwing all the widows in town and that kind of stuff, like this is old fashioned boss hog bullshit. But I will say you're absolutely right, and my favorite part about the Ten Commandments thing. My favorite thing about the Ten Commandments is that the First Amendment makes 5 of them unconstitutional immediately. So ultimately, if they want to have a conversation, that's the logical fallacy they're going to run into at some point. And also honor thy father and thy mother isn't about praising your father and your mother. It's about not making them look bad by being an asshole. Live up to a standard they would be proud of. And like that's one of the many things these assholes don't grasp. The other one is that Donald Trump is effectively a coveter in chief. He is there's a reason why coveting, and I talk about this sometimes on the show, but like coveting and envy are different. Envy is I want a car like that. Coveting is I want their car. And Trump is one of the most covetous, fucking disgusting people in the world. And that's, the fruit hangs off that tree. That's how maggots are. It isn't enough to build their own. There used to be this bootstrapper mentality around maggots, but now it's reclaiming territory like they're fucking Putin with Ukraine.
But while Trump himself has no beliefs other than in himself and grandizing all things. I mean, it was pretty telling. I mean, every day we get an example of this, but it was crazy the other day when a reporter asked him how he's feeling after Charlie Kirk died. And he goes, pretty good. And then that night you saw him at Yankee Stadium doing the double jerk off motion dance. But he he said good and then pivoted.
Built my Epstein ballroom. Built in the Epstein ballroom. Yeah.
Which was crazy. But I do think it's important to say, while he's not an evangelical Christian and believes in nothing and probably doesn't believe that he's going to ever die, so many of the people that he has appointed in the highest, Pete Hegseth is a Secretary of Defense, and he comes from a crazy evangelical sect that doesn't believe women should vote. People should look up Doug Wilson out there in Moscow, Idaho. Yeah. But also, judges he's appointing. I think most important, we could go down the line in his cabinet secretaries and so on, but the judges he is appointing, which have such an effect on our lives and our culture, particularly in the Supreme Court, are what matters the most. And they believe in the craziest of all crazy Jesus, the worst Jesus ever, the whitest, most vindictive Jesus that you could possibly imagine, who doesn't even have abs.
Right. Yeah, which is required, by the way, and a big scratch. Which if you ever read like Caesar's Messiah, there's an old great story about how they were planning on faking his survival on the thing of it, and so the spear had water in it, and that's why water came from the wound, because the little stunt they made didn't work. It was full of like pomegranate juice and stuff, and it like, oh shit, he broke my spear. Anyways, another tale for another time. I will say this, when it comes to Pete Hegseth's wife is like that. Pete Hegseth is a womanizing drunkard. Pete Hegseth is blazingly full of shit. And if you ever want a good time, watch the awkward exchanges between him and his wife when she was trying to help him get his shit together, drinking-wise and sexually, where they pray every morning before he goes off to work. That was
saying,
her
I'm not
idea.
Sure why I'm not sure why you're saying his wife is like that, because this is part of the tenet of that belief that men should.
Right. And I believe there are true believers, and I believe there are bullshitters. And there is an element of, I think we can all agree that if the Ayatollah is more than likely full of shit too, but if Putin wasn't a hedonist, if he was hyper religious and believed that his reward would come on the other side in Valhalla or fucking on some sort of godly mountaintop for seizing land for his people like he was Genghis Khan, then we'd all have already had a nuclear war by now. But he's a hedonistic, self-involved prick at the expense of his own people. He steals their money, hides it someplace, because his idea of heaven is being physically alive on a yacht with inappropriately young women. That's Putin, right? And so the fact that he's a bullshitter, he doesn't go to fucking church. He doesn't go to the fucking Russian Orthodox. It's all a show for the saps that do, because that's his view of them. And Hegseth's wife is all in. Hegseth, though, is a hedonist. He's just like fucking Hannity and all these other dipshits at Fox News who are in it for
No.
themselves. They don't think their reward is in heaven. He doesn't. His wife does. He does not.
I would argue that many of the leaders and preachers of this sect of evangelical Christianity
Paula
are
White,
all,
absolutely.
it
Yep.
is part of their, they don't call it hedonism. They speak out against it, but you better believe they practice it in any number of ways. I mean, not to mention just
The old
assaulting
Matt
children
Schlapp and Tickle. Right.
every day you hear a story of another, quote, man of the cloth, some right-wing evangelical minister assaulting or raping a child, a young woman
Right.
or man. And it happens every day. So I think it's part of the inner workings of what they believe. They've convinced themselves that's the kingdom of heaven. They get anything that they want. And the man obviously is in charge. So the point is, there's so many of these people that believe that. Charlie Kirk certainly believed it. And so many do. So many of his supporters believe
Yes.
it as well. And that's why it's so terrifying. And that's why we have to confront it at every place it shows up. That's why you, by the way, you have to confront it with your closest friends, white men. Like, I was really pissed that a lot of other guys in my high school group chat didn't speak up. I'm like, dude, it doesn't make nearly as much of a difference if you say something at work or you say something on social media where people don't know you, where the guys who know you your whole life, they like you, they respect you, they think highly of you. If you weigh in with your strong views, it matters. It matters most. It's indelible on the people who think you believe that you have credibility and actually love and respect you. And then as soon as I lectured a couple of my friends, they started chiming in. But, you know, I mean, this is where we can be most effective. And so this is where we should be most effective.
Sure.
The standard the standard you walk past is the standard you accept.
Right, and it's all, but also the traits you exhibit are the traits you really believe. I have always believed that you are not your best traits or your worst traits. You are the tension between the two. The human that you are is the tension between your best and your worst self. The thing that you manage to actually allow to exist in the world. Your aspirations meeting with your failures is your personality. It is who you are, and so living up to those standards in your own life. And again, that may include, with close friends, mistakenly or not, biding your time and having the conversation when they're ready to hear it, exuding that behavior in their presence, and then going, "Hey, man, I'm not dunking on you, but did you notice I didn't give you any shit when you were clamoring about this, but I got to tell you, that guy's. I want you to explain to me how you think his beliefs were Christian.
Sure.
Go." You know, and there's an element to that. I'm always a big fan of when someone is being a total hypocrite, let them lead you there themselves. Whether you know it ahead of time, of course you know it, but
Yes.
Walk them into that canyon from a Sun Tzu Art of War level. You need to walk them onto dead ground.
I think I think you make a good point of how to handle it with certain people. Don't choose every battle at every, because if you want to be effective at changing hearts and minds, you can't do it by embarrassing and dunking on people that you care about and know. Now, I certainly did it in this chat because I hate that motherfucker, and I didn't think I was his mind. I wanted to make sure the other guys in that chat knew right from wrong.
Right. Sure, absolutely. And again, I don't know this group, so I can't speak to that. And that's why it's a very personal choice. It's why everybody has to read the room and read their own experience. But I've always been a big fan of, being conspicuously generous, conspicuously kind, conspicuously progressive in that regard. Like, and I've been arguing lately, and I think it's been a great conversation. You can tell because the hour is blasting by. And Pete Dominick has a show called Stand Up with Pete Dominick and a podcast, and you got to listen to it and all that stuff. But one of the things I'm struck by in our current conversation is the sort of like sportsification, our side versus their side part of it, especially when, if in a sports game, we're supposed to all apply the same rules to ourselves. And yet we all end up like John McEnroe yelling at the ref instead of recognizing strategy in the other person's thing and knowing that a person can only lie to themselves so much, which brings me to the Epstein files. of all this stuff, you and I have talked a bunch about how to deal with, like, the impact of the Charlie Kirk assassination last week, and the ramifications of making sure that people aren't, driven to do shit like this or anything like it, which is a valuable conversation at any given time. But what it has served to do on Trump's behalf is draw attention away from the Epstein files and the fact that he probably had an ischemic stroke last Wednesday night, and why half of his face is melting off like he took a peek inside the Ark of the Covenant and then shut the lid. So right?
Belloc.
Yeah, it just went like, but that's what happened. So the key though is that this is serving him in that regard, and he is doing everything he can to ratchet up this violence and ratchet up this stuff, because I've said no matter what happens in hiding the contents of the Epstein file, whether maggots decide, fuck this guy, I'm never staying in a Trump property ever again, I'm burning my red hat, or whatever the fuck, or I'm not buying Don Jr.'s crypto anymore, whatever it is, no matter how bad it gets, even if it is a minor civil war on the streets of America, because that's what he had the last year he was in office the first time, even if it's that, it's better than what's ever in the files.
Except for, first of all,
for him.
the people who are buying in any conspiracies around the Charlie Kirk assassin, like, oh, it was done to distract from the Epstein files.
It was Israel, it was China, no, I'm not saying it was done to distract. I'm saying Trump is using it like he would use anything. Right.
No doubt about it. That doesn't mean the effect isn't actually the case. And I think you're right. I also happen to think the Epstein files are not going away, because I'm in media and study media and understand that the problem that we are facing is also important here as not a solution, but an element that is being animated in real time. We're watching the Epstein files. That issue, everybody knows what that means. And it's salacious, and there's powerful people, and it's sex, and it's understandable. It's not like Trump's other financial crimes. People just, or tax policy where your head and your eyes just glaze over. People know what we're talking about. His people acted like they cared about victims, like they cared about kids' well-being somehow more than liberals and Democrats, which is laughable. Obviously, they're far more likely to be abusive. However, it's a man problem, not a liberal conservative problem, I think. But it's not going away, Hal. The Epstein files are not going away, because certainly Democrats, elected, and media understand what it is, obviously. And so do a lot of actual well-meaning or people who act like they care about it. It's just, I don't think it's going away, no matter how, somebody did an analysis, how often it was mentioned on Fox versus MSNBC and CNN, mentioned far more, obviously, on CNN and MSNBC than on Fox. So Fox can ignore it, but Democrats aren't going to ignore it. Reporters aren't going to ignore it. It's going to get you clicks, and goddamn, it's important. It really is an important issue. So
it's got everything. It as a scandal, and I think this is the thing that Trump is having the hardest time even contemplating, because he doesn't give a shit about anybody but himself, and even his own level of self-involvement is based on what I would say is pathological low self-esteem. He knows he has it coming. He's just trying to put that day off as long as possible, and he's not a narcissist. He can't stand his own reflection, and it's why he hates women, because he thinks there's only two kinds of women in the world: women who can see how ugly and gross he is and don't want to have sex with him, and women who will, but only because he has money. And so women are either whores or they can see through his disguise, and so he despises them for that reason. And so that his narrow sort of horse blinders about this shit keeps him from recognizing that it feeds right into America's true crime obsession. It is the root of QAnon and the whole child adrenochrome sex trafficking thing that was the defining reason that brought them to vote for him in the first place against Hillary Clinton, because they'd been sold this adrenochrome nonsense and this anti-woman shit since the 90s, based on the fact that the Republicans put a target on her back because she came up with S-chip. And any woman who's trying to get free insurance for kids has got to go. And if she ever tries to run for office, she was going to have a target on her back, which she did. So Trump doesn't recognize how deep, I think, on the right, their own self-image is predicated on this happening, on these files coming out.
it's such a huge scandal, as you mentioned. It's tailor made for today's media. Well, let me ask you this real quick, though. What do you make of the Republicans who are now covering for Trump? For example, when they saw the letter that the drawing that he made and the wonderful secret that they kept and his signature, and then they said, "I believe it's forged." They know there's so much bad faith in today's political conversation, almost entirely when talking to conservative Republicans. But what do you make of the electeds in Congress specifically or elsewhere that are supporting his denials over the Epstein, trying to help him now distract from Epstein, now that they know he's in them, according to his own AG?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a bunch of people who know that there's way worse stuff in there, but this ain't it. So they feel like they can dodge it up to that point, and they can show their fealty to MAGA up until the very last day, till the pictures that Michael Wolff saw of Trump getting a lap dance from these underage girls with the stain on his pants. I'm sure you've heard that story. If you haven't, it's pretty gnarly. But he's seen Polaroids that Epstein had in his safe of this very thing. Until that stuff comes out, these guys are going to hold the line. And I think I believe Thomas Massey in what he said. That they are being threatened, and that combination of, on the one hand, it's a threat. And on the other hand, they believe that there's no real way to prove. Nobody's going to take this and do an ink analysis on it because Kash Patel runs the FBI. They're not going to look. Pam Bondi is going to ignore any kind of depth of evidence, right? And they figure Trump will, sue somebody, they'll settle, and that'll prove it was bullshit all along. That's what they're hoping for. And up until the day somebody goes, "Yep, we tested the ink. It's from a pen that we actually found that he had on his desk still because he never cleans his office, in his office in New York. It's that pen, it's Pam Bondi's DOJ that sent it to Quantico, and they figured it out." Until that moment, they can go, it's fake, and that's that. And so they are, the threat of what he's going to do to them if they try to run again, or maggots killing them, quite frankly, because there's this real undercurrent of violence on the right against anybody who, that sheepdogs them back into behaving. So they feel like until I think a lot of them know there's a dam breaking moment coming at some point. But up until that moment, they go, "I defended him all the way up to this, but I gotta say, at this very moment, the picture of him with a 14-year-old on his lap in the airplane is a line too far," right? That's going to be it. And until they see that kind of evidence, they're gonna pretend it's all bullshit, and as a way to protect how they've been protecting him the whole time.
By the way, a lot of people, calling me out and other progressives for saying, "Oh, now you're paying attention to Jeffrey Epstein. Why didn't you care during the Biden administration?" And I'm very happy to remind them that in 2018, me and many other progressive media folks interviewed Julie K. Brown. Mm-hmm. I interviewed her in 2018 and in 2019. I looked it up. Right. She's the person. She's the journalist who broke the Miami story.
Yeah.
And so Rachel Maddow had her on. Like, we've been following this story since Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald, who has been covering. It's not new to us, but would you think that some picture or video or image is going to come out that's going to implicate Donald Trump directly with a minor? Do you think that?
Yes. Whether he knows that person was a minor at the time or not will be part of the thing, and in the allegation of how Epstein used to trap people. The issue with Trump is that, and why he and I think why Dershowitz and some of the others feel so safe, is that the closer you were to the scheme itself, the safer you felt. That if because you can, Trump bought Adnan Khashoggi's yacht. Remember that? Okay, and Epstein was helping Adnan Khashoggi, traffic arms in the 80s, right around Iran-Contra, post Bear Stearns, like gnarled up. And one of the things about that boat that everybody talked about was that there were cameras in every room. That was the thing. There are cameras in every room in this, and that issue, that was almost the biggest selling point for Trump. Because at one point, Trump thought he was going to go into the same business. He needed money. He was getting his money from Russia. He was backing his loans from these other places. And so he was looking at where Epstein got his money from, and that's where it came. Les Wexner signing over those billions, power of attorney to Jeffrey Epstein. in the early 90s, right about the time Trump had to borrow $56 million from his brother and his sister to keep the lights on at the company.
How things have changed. Trump and his family made more than Epstein probably did in just a few days with one of his crypto schemes, number one. Number two, I don't think those pictures and videos ever come out. I think they come out about as soon as the Apprentice videos of him saying the N-word come out. I don't know that we see them, but even if those videos came out, N-word videos or him with a minor, they're going to say, and he's going to say the same thing that he said when we saw the letter, that he said he's going to say it's, and so will his supporters, it's AI, it's not real. So what does it really change?
Okay,
will there be consequences?
Yeah, no. So I think the reality isn't why he feels like he can fight it so long is because he can stiff arm it because he believes that either the girls that were involved were Eastern European and were sent back or never left the island and that kind of stuff, which is really terrible. That's the other thing about Epstein was that one girl tried to swim for her life and the bodyguards grabbed her, and I mean it's horrifyingly terrible. And again, Trump in this world, there's so much there that even the Republicans who are defending him know it. They just figure that MAGA will stomach it up to a certain line. But there's more to come, even if you never see the actual ones that Michael Wolff is talking about, even if it's just that. They're about 2 degrees away from the turnaway. Look at his numbers. His numbers have boiled down to the absolute bottom of the bowl.
I hope I hope you're right. One of the worst things he did, though, is the action that he has taken to move Ghislaine Maxwell, the most notorious pedophile in the country, to a minimum security prison. He did that. Why aren't they shocked and outraged by that? That's the worst. Can't make.
I would argue that they are. But there are that was the big Groyper Charlie Kirk split largely, was that Charlie Kirk was getting marching orders from the White House. He literally at one point was like, I'm waiting for the White House to tell me what to say about it. He let that slip on his show. Whereas the hyper right wing, the QAnon, the 8 to 10% of MAGA that put him over the top, that guaranteed that he could lock in, like a Tupperware top, the maggot vote. They were this. I'm promised the Epstein stuff. I will get this. And those folks, the files don't even have to come out for those folks. Every day it doesn't come out is a failure. And so it's just as bad. So every day that he hides these things, or they get the same files like Liz Wheeler did, and they get the same 30,000 pages over and over and over again, that these people online anyways, and what I've seen in my, hunting down their little, subgroups and their online forums, which is what blossomed into his original presidency in the first place, those people are eating him alive. And they are not, are they going to vote for us? No. Are they going to stop voting? Yes. These people are going to pack their shit and go back home. They're not going to show up and support him.
It's interesting if the consequences are he's going to lose support at the ballot box. That's great, but do we still have ballot boxes, and are there any other consequences at all? Because that's the knock on obviously Trump, is that there are never consequences, no matter how guilty he is.
Well, first of all, life has a way of catching up to you, and I think the next time you and I talk, I've got Tara Dublin waiting in the wings, and I'll bring her in just 1 minute. But I want to. The next time we talk, you and I can talk about the fact that no one outruns Mother Nature, and Donald Trump's brain is turning to tapioca live. That's the real show everyone is watching right now, whether they know it or not. Everything he said about Biden is true about him 100 times over, and that's the thing he can't outrun. And once the king's cheek has blood on it, once there's a cut, he's a man and he can be taken down. That's what and then there is no successor. I don't care what anybody says about J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel. There is no one waiting in the wings that can pick up this mantle from Donald Trump.
I think you're right about that. I don't know what you think about fake blood. Tara Dublin, hello. I'm excited to watch you talk with her, Hal, and thank you so much for having me today. It was great to catch up with you. Great to see you, and obviously great to talk with you.
Great conversation, and we got to do this again, because I know there's a depth of this conversation that we need to have about as two straight white guys who raise their kids to be decent human beings. I feel we're deeply unrepresented in our lived experience.
I will say that I showed the booker at Stand Up with New York, who is a gay man, my testicles for a Wednesday night spot in 1998. I will say that.
Sure, right, okay. And I lost a role in Poltergeist 3, because I wouldn't with the casting director. So
same guy, by the way.
yeah,
Hal,
probably.
thank you very much.
Yeah, dude, Pete, you're awesome. Thank you. Stand Up with Pete Dominick. Please check it out. Appreciate you, brother, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, all right, buddy. Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
there you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen.